Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. This is Grad School Buddy, the show that gives simple answers to questions about grad school. I'm your host, Ebele Chukwumoyi, a development economist and impact storyteller who has a master's from Georgetown University and a bachelor's from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. We hope the show helps you make better grad school decisions. Let's dive right in. In today's episode, we discussed for 20 minutes and then the guest realized I was not recording. So if you guys get half-baked information, the blame is on me. But today I am chilling with Andrea and I'm really, really excited. We've been trying to create this episode for 2 months. Today we'll be talking about internships. Andrea has a lot of very diverse experiences and very, very rich experiences, especially as an international student who has found a lot of diverse gigs. I personally feel that she is one of the people I know who have worked in a lot of very different work environments, from the private sector to the international NGO sector. And I also really feel this interview is important because Andrea is someone who knows what she wants. And there have been situations where even though jobs feel or seem like they are the best on the outside, they didn't resonate with her as a person. And she's one of the few people I know who have been bold enough to leave. And I think that these insights are very important, especially for young people who are navigating the job search phase of grad school. So I don't want to talk too much. I will turn it over to Andrea to please introduce herself to us, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Abele. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea. I am, as Abele said, a foreign student from Caracas, Venezuela. I moved to the US about 9 years ago to pursue my college education. I moved to Minnesota at the time, and I graduated with my degree in applied economics and global studies. After that, I worked for a little bit, for a year to be exact, first at a NGO that works with refugees that's called Alight in Minnesota. And then after that, I worked in market research for a small firm. And my clients at the time were in the financial and healthcare sector. After that, I decided to move to DC to pursue my master's in international development policy, which is where I met Ebele. And after I graduated from my master's in DC, I worked for a little bit as a freelance consultant, and then I worked for an international development firm. And after that, I'm now living in New York City, where I work for a consulting firm that works with clients in the government sector, nonprofit, different foundations. And right now I'm working with the team in New York City.
Okay, so now you guys see why I say that she has a lot of very interesting experiences. And I am so excited to ask you questions about each of them. I think the first thing I want to ask you is about, like, if you could take us back, because I know that part of what I would really want for you to share with people is your journey, before you started finding the jobs, like the main jobs, when you were still a grad student and you were looking for internships. Can you please take us through what that process was for you, both in terms of how long it took for you to find it, the procedure that you took? Was it stressful, the emotional part? Anything that you're willing to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is going to sound super cheesy. I feel like ever since I was, I don't know, like 8 or 10 years old, I knew that I wanted to make a difference in the world. And so I would say that as a kid, I always dreamed of working at the United Nations. That was like my big dream. So I feel like every single decision I've made since I was, I don't know, since I was, about to graduate high school, every single decision I've made has been based on that dream of mine. But then when I graduated from college, I'm going back to college now, but after I graduated college, I realized, okay, working at the UN, it's gonna take having a master's degree, and it's gonna take, having connections. And I started to realize how, hard it was to get into these organizations. So I don't know how, but I found, oh no, okay, I do remember how. I was part of Model United Nations in college, and I knew somebody there who worked at this NGO that I first worked at. And I remember she was leaving her job and the position was open. So I basically applied and told her, hey, I applied. Could you tell me more about it? And she was like, oh, I'll tell my boss about you to see if they call you. So that's one of the things that happened at the time. So, okay, after I worked at that NGO for refugees in Minnesota, I realized that, and that was the time when the Venezuelan migration crisis was very big. So that, it sparked something in my heart. Belle, I'm being so cheesy. Anyways,
Don't worry, like I'm letting you
okay.
finish so that I can come in with my that's so cheesy.
Okay, perfect. So I realized that was like a calling for me, like in my heart I felt like, okay, this is something that I care about. Because saying like I want to make a difference in the world, I think that everybody makes a difference in the world in their own different ways. Like you don't necessarily have to work for the UN to make a difference in the world, right? So I felt in my heart like this is the way that I am called to make a difference. And so that led me to narrow down to, okay, I want to work in the migration and refugee space, and I want to in that like policy area. So when I moved to DC, I found that Georgetown had this center for that works in migration research, and I remember I contacted the professor, one of the professors. I think, I'm not sure if she's still the director of that center or not, but I contacted her and we met, and I was like, oh, I'm interested in learning about your projects, like what you're doing right now, and if there's any way in which I could help. And I remember mentioning to her, because at the time COVID didn't exist at the time. It was January of 2020, and I remember I told her like, oh, I'm supposed to have an internship and move to another country for the summer, because that was when we would still do that. And she was like, okay, I'll help you. Send me your resume and let's see if you can work with me in one of my projects. So I basically started to work with her as part of like, that was like a student employment, student job I had when I was doing my master's. And I don't know how I came across, oh yeah, so Dime posted their positions. You know how Dime does recruiting, Dime at the World Bank. So I was like, oh, okay, it would be cool. So I saw that Dime posted their positions and I applied. And honestly, they took a really long time in getting back to me. I applied in February and they got back to me basically like 2 weeks before school was over and the summer was gonna start. So through that application, that's how I found my internship at Dime, at the bank. But I remember there was another professor at Georgetown. I'm honestly, I'm making this response super long. I'll try to narrow it down to be more concise.
But but for real, the idea is to get as much information as possible. So do not limit, like okay. Do not feel.
Okay, cool. So there was this other professor who I was taking his class, and he used to work at the bank. So I was like, hey, professor, same thing. I'm supposed to find an internship for the summer, and I would love, your input and who I could talk to, anybody you can connect me with, etc. And he was like, okay, what are you interested at? And I told him. So he connected me with someone at the bank who was not a Dime, but still. And I talked to this person. And this person from the bank was like, honestly, I don't know anything about our projects, about our jobs, but the consultant on my team, he would be able to help you. And I basically was like, okay, can you put me in touch with this consultant? And I talked to that consultant, and we're actually like friends nowadays. His name is also Diego. And I talked to Diego, like we met at the time, and I literally, honestly, this is the struggle of international students, Ebele. I come to this meeting prepared to like talk to him about the summer and everything. We sit down, and first thing he asks, he goes, so project that's starting next week with Venezuelan migrants and refugees. Are you interested in helping and do you know how to use data? Literally, I jumped out of my seat and I'm like, yes, I'm interested. And yes, I know Stata.
Mhm.
Granted, we only had one semester of learning Stata,
Oh my
but I was
God.
like, I know everything about Stata. So it was I'm saying the international student struggle thing because my court was like, you're not allowed to work right now. You need to wait till the summer. And I was like, that's impossible. I really need to work on this. Like, I want this. And, anyways, what I ended up doing it to problem solve the situation, I was like, I'm going to do this. In my mind, I was like, this is mine. Nobody's taking this from me. I'm going to find a way. And I found a way. I remember I met so this same professor, the migration professor that I mentioned,
Mhm.
I met with her one time to, discuss the work that I was doing for her. And we get on this Zoom and she's like, "Oh, how are you doing?" And I literally tell her, "I'm so sad. I wish I was American."
Oh.
She was like, "What?" And I was like, I started telling her the full story and she's like, "Okay, I'm going to help you. Let's tell these people to give us the project since it's migration based and then you can just do the project under my supervision."
Yeah,
And so it ended up working out.
that's so
And I guess
cool.
a lesson learned from this is like when you're sometimes I struggle a lot with being vulnerable. And of course, there's people that you can be vulnerable with and people that absolutely cannot. But once you find the people that give you that safe space, you never know what's going to come from it. Like I didn't think that telling a professor that I was sad that I wasn't allowed to take this or anything would
Yeah.
lead me to being able to do it. So yeah,
First of all,
that
I feel sorry, did I cut you?
no, go ahead. I was gonna say that that's just my journey, like a lot of connections and a lot of like finding opportunities
Mhm.
um where I could, yeah.
First of all, I want to say that you saying that you were making the answer very long is not a thing because I feel that you were sharing very useful information from, like taking us through your journey in Minnesota and how you found out that migration is your thing. I think that's very, very important. And I think that's one of the things that's really exciting about the work that we do. It's how like we can like be in such close proximity with each other, but be working on entirely different things. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things you talked about was how at every point in time when someone asked you what you wanted to do, you already had a ready answer. You told them like, I'm really interested in migration, especially the influence the crisis in Venezuela had on you. And so I think that there is also a lesson there in, I think like at some point, all of us kind of have to take 2 seconds to sit down and think about, okay, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
what part of the world do I think that I want to play in? And you also said something about, everyone makes a difference in the world in their own different ways. And I believe that too. I think that we all have a mission and everybody has
Mm-hmm.
something to offer and everyone is on this unique journey where you meet people and people meet you and somehow it's like you leave marks on each other basically. And something else you
Yeah.
also talked about, like something else that was also very clear in the journey that you shared with us is how you were always willing to put yourself out there and network. And what you also said about like when you find your people, the ability to be vulnerable with them is something I resonate with because in my situation, it was also a professor who saved me, as I shared with Andrea just before this call started.
Mm-hmm.
I had a professor. He was like, "Okay, yes, I will hire you, and you can support research, the research I'm working on, until you find something that you like or something better." And I just think like cultivating those relationships. I don't really believe in fake networking where you know that you really don't vibe
Mm-hmm.
with this person, but you're calling them. Like, why are you doing that to yourself and to them? But when you find your people, nurture those relationships and be willing to open up to them. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing those gems.
No, definitely. I agree 100% with you.
And what do you think, like in all of this? Because I know that it sounds like you were all through the process, you were powering through and everything was Gucci. But I know that there were times when things were down, whether it was like through the interview phases or through like applying to so many places and getting rejection emails, which I know that my my inbox had a whole lot of. So, like, what would you say was the most challenging part of this process? And did you ever find a way around it? If you did, can you please share that with us?
Yeah, so I think I would say the two times that have been the most challenging professionally for me, where the first one was when I graduated college, because like as international students, I was like, okay, I don't want to have unemployment based on my OPT. So I had to take a job that was so my work at the refugee NGO was actually an unpaid internship. But I
Oh
was
my
like, okay, I
God.
need to take this
How did you
because
pay for your bills? Like, how did you pay for stuff?
I basically had savings. And it was like you said, it was a summer of staying at home. But but it was, yeah, it was hard. And I was like, okay, I need to take this. But I told myself, and I think I asked my parents, I was like, okay, could you help me for 1 month until I find a paying job? um and I think it took me like 2 months. I think it took me like 2 months or a month or something till I found like a paying job. And yeah, but I worked hard that month to like get it. um and then when last year, I would say, was the other one that was very challenging professionally, because I was at this point, like when I was at McCord, I think I was part of MPIP, and I knew MPIP is it's a student group that works with nonprofits in Latin America and helps them with different projects in monitoring and evaluation, especially. So being a part of MPIP made me realize that I really enjoyed working with clients in like a client space, and like if somebody comes to us with, okay, I need I need MPIP to help me solve this situation that I have. I love, brainstorming how to do it and everything. So that was also like same as with the refugees. That was for me like a calling as well. Into I enjoy working with clients and in different projects. And so when I graduated McCourt, that I did all the freelancing, that was nice. But then when I found this job at the international development firm, like last year, I think was challenging in the sense that I didn't feel connected at all to the work. And in the sense that it was just too much, I was moving from DC to New York, and that, moving is challenging. And besides that, I didn't really enjoy my work. So, waking up every day at 9, 8 a.m. to come to work at 9 to 5, and doing that every single day, like it honestly took like a toll on me and on my mental health. Like I all I talked about to everybody around me was about how much I hated my life, basically, because I was at this job that I didn't like. And it just takes a toll on you. It wasn't until I had like 6 months like that, like very, like, I don't want to say dark months because they were not that dark, but they were just like very challenging months for me. And one point when I reached like my bottom, I was like, okay, you know what? When I reached my bottom was once I moved to New York, and I realized, I'm living in a new city, but I'm being just at home doing something that I don't enjoy at all. And like honestly, the other thing was that I wanted to meet people through at least through my job, or like being able to co-work with people that I actually enjoyed spending time with. So that's what led me to say, okay, you know what? I'm gonna find something new. And the way I did it, you know how I said I manifested it before we started recording. So
Yeah.
basically, I found this person on LinkedIn. She honestly, like the professor for you, this this woman saved me, honestly. I found her and I saw that she also worked for migrants, refugees, and I saw that she worked for UNICEF. So I was like, oh, this I don't know what, but I felt like I had to message her. So I message her and I see that she's also a coach, like a, what is it? Professional or a women empowerment coach or something. And I was like, oh, she must be like a cool person to talk to. So I
Mm-hmm.
message her and we talked, and she basically helped me realize how when you're focusing on the things that you hate, basically, and that you don't like, that's the energy that you're attracting. So if every day you wake up and you're like, oh, I can't swear, but like, oh, again, and you're like, I don't want to do this, I hate this, blah, blah, blah. That's what you're attracting to your life constantly. Like, that's the energy you're bringing to every single day. So at some point, she made me realize, like, if you start focusing on yourself, on taking care of yourself, like, in the end, the job is as important as yourself. So if you yourself start taking care, going, I don't know, doing activities you enjoy. For me, that's going on walks, going to the gym, cooking food that I like, spending time with my friends, with my partner, doing all these things. If you start focusing on those things, you're going to see how the challenges that come from job searching, like you were saying, like the rejection emails, those are really hard, challenging. Um, and I experienced that when I was looking for jobs, but I was so focused on myself and my well-being that I was like, okay, this rejection, she actually said something that stuck with me. She was like, rejection is redirection. So getting rejected means that you're being redirected to your actual mission in life, which I was like, okay, that's true. Like, if I'm not getting something, it means that it was not for me at the time. So yeah, I think I would say that what kept me sane, or what helped me a lot in challenging times, was, first of all, recognizing that it was a challenging time, like, not not being like, how do you say that, not being
In denial.
oblivious about it, in denial, yeah,
Yeah.
not being in denial about it, but also saying, okay, this is challenging, I know I can get out of this, I'm gonna use my resources. Like, I used every single connection I've made, like every single person I knew. I was like, okay, I'm going through this, like, if you see any job that you think might fit, let me know. I actually spoke to one of our professors too, to Andreas, um, and he was like, you're
Okay, I
gonna
just
see
want to
that.
say that
What?
I am an Andreas fangirl. So
Oh, I
because
mean,
Andreas was
yes.
very helpful to me too. Like Andreas kept connecting me to people that he knew. And okay, I'm sorry, I will stop talking.
No, 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 no. Go ahead, because like Andreas, yeah, he's the best. He connected me to every single person he knew as well. So I started doing all of this thing, and the way that I was saying that I manifested this, that was that. But I mean, the journey with my current job is another thing. I can tell you about it later on. But I basically told myself, this was like October, right? And I basically wrote in a piece of paper, I will have a new job by Thanksgiving. And I let it be.
You
And like a month later, this was like November 9th, I was getting a call for the job that I currently have, like offering me the position. And it was basically like working towards my goals, but also recognizing the challenges, being gentle to myself. Um, but yeah, working towards my goals every day without being also obsessive about it in a way. Yeah.
you can see me, but I'm pouting. I'm pouting at you, like writing it and saying like I'm gonna have a job. I think that sometimes we all need that extra layer of faith.
Yeah.
As always, I'm
And it's
going to.
hard.
Mhm. Yeah, it is
It is
very
really
hard, you
hard.
know. So I think like job search does a lot of things to you. There is the phase of
Yeah.
like, okay, everybody is unemployed and it's a little funny. Then people
Hmm.
start getting jobs and you're like, okay, okay. So funny
That's
anymore.
honestly so hard. Yeah. No, it's so hard when you see that that was the same thing when we were in school and I saw all my friends getting jobs. I was like, okay, I'm happy for all of you. But like, I want one too.
Yeah. And there is that like you're also trying not to start feeling sorry for yourself because it doesn't help.
Hmm.
Like you have to stay
No, it's so
focused.
true. Yeah.
first of all, I'm going to try to kind of give a recap to remind the listeners of the things that we have talked about in the last few minutes. So, Andrea talked about how the most challenging part of the journey for her was straight out of college, taking the free job. And let me tell you something. The bills in America don't care about your dad, okay? Come with your
Honestly.
cash. So I can imagine how stressful that was for you. And also
Yeah.
you talked about, like how working hard was kind of very, very important. Like how you kind of had to push through that 1 month where you were in that free role because you know that you needed to find something else. And you also talked about how your family support was something that you leaned on. And it's something that we have shared a lot about on this podcast, whether it's like your family, your friends, basically whoever you call your community. And I know you
Mhm.
talked a little bit about freelancing and dime, but I'll leave that till the end because I actually have like in-depth questions to ask you there. And then you talked about, LinkedIn and
Mhm.
connecting with that lady. And for real, I feel that if you have the means, then when I just finished grad school, I couldn't afford it every time. So like once in 3 months, I would pay for LinkedIn Premium and I would use the hell out of it. So like
Yes.
LinkedIn can be that tool. Like please do not neglect it. And what you said about rejection equals yeah. I said equals like an economist. Hold on. What you said about rejection, being redirection in certain lights is also very, very true. And this is something that I have experienced, both in terms of like out of desperation, you're so willing to take a job where the pay isn't even all that good, or the joy that you would derive from working there isn't so much, but you're just willing to do it because, okay, like the circumstances around you warrant that you kind of take that job. And when you get rejected, it feels like the end of the world.
Yeah.
But we assure you
No.
that there is like some after party to the end of the world. It's like end of the world points 2.0. Okay, but I really want to ask you about what it like. First of all, something I wanted to ask you when you answered the first question and then I forgot was about your internship with Dime. Can you please tell the listeners, because I know that we know because we are in DC, but can you please tell the listeners like what Dime is and what's your like what was a day in your life being an intern at Dime? That's like the first part of the question. But the second question was actually about freelancing. Like, what did it feel like to be a freelancer as an international student? And what did you do to ensure that, because when we have an OPT, it's like terms and conditions are applied. So, what
Yeah.
did you do to ensure that you kept to those terms and conditions?
Okay, so the first question, DIME is the Development Impact and Evaluation Unit at the World Bank. So it's the unit at the World Bank that works in doing impact evaluation in different countries and in different topics. So I was working for a project in Burkina Faso with the team that works in, I think it was governance and conflict fragility and violence. Basically, they hired me as an intern to write a report. So I learned how to use LaTeX, which is a kind of like a software to write reports, like economic reports. And I spent most of my time writing these. And then I also had to create some graphs and visualizations to put inside the report. And then they also needed someone to support with another report that was about, I think it was migration from Syria to Jordan. And they needed somebody to help them with drafting that report as well. So I would say I was an intern there for about almost a year, I think. Not 9 months, more than that. For almost a year, like 11 months, I think. I did it while I was still in school, and I also did it over one summer. And I would say it would kind of be like a lot of it would be individual, so drafting this report and then sharing it with my manager and the others on my team so I could get feedback from them. And then a big part of what I did as well was plan this kind of like workshop for municipal leaders in Burkina Faso. So they would learn more about impact evaluation, and they would also be excited about it and want to work more in projects like this. So yeah, I think that was the main thing I did. What was the second question again?
First of all, like that sounds a good mix of like exciting, adventurous, like, oh my God, no. The part where you were talking about the data, that's the oh my God, no. But then,
Honestly,
like interacting with the people in Burkina Faso, yeah, that's the cool part.
that was cool. I got to practice my French, so that was
Oh,
cool.
it's true.
Yeah,
Tu parles
yeah.
français.
We.
Okay, but the second part of the question was about your freelancing and how you managed
Mm.
to ensure that you kept to the terms of your OPT.
So all of the different projects I had were related to our degree. And what I found out, so when you are in your 1 year OPT, there are rules that apply, but the rules are a bit more flexible compared to when you are in your STEM years. So in your second and or third year of STEM, for those, for those who have the possibility of getting STEM. Um, so during that first year, I asked the international students office about it. I was like, oh, I found this. And they were like, oh, you can totally do it as long as it is 20 hours or more, and that is related to your major. And as long as you would enter, the information in the portal every time. Um, so that's what I did to stay compliant. And there is no, I don't think, I think the only restriction is that when you are in your 1 year is that it is at least 20 hours and that it is related to your studies. Yeah.
Oh, but like something else you actually talked about, like very, very briefly, and when you talked about it, we could hear the light in your voice, is about your current job. So can you tell us, like, a little bit about this role that made you leave us, the cool ones in the DMV, and move to New York? It must have been very exciting, and you must have really felt like this is my job for you to decide, like, hey, I'm willing to move for this position. So, number one, can you tell us, about your work, like your organization, if you feel comfortable with that, and the work that you do specifically, and what excites
Yeah.
you about it, basically?
Yeah. Okay, so I can tell you how I got it because it's a crazy, it's kind of a crazy story. So I do you remember Ari from our program? So Ari in 2021, yes. In 2021, she sent to one of the groups from a court. She sent this organization that I worked at currently. It's called Delivery Associates. So she was like, "Hey everyone, my friend posted these positions on LinkedIn if anybody is interested." So I checked the website and I immediately was like, okay, I want to work here. And it's hard to explain why. I just felt like it, but I could say that I guess their mission really resonated with me because they had on their website how they, try to work against not against bureaucracies, but to help with solving different bureaucracies and to like help government be better and help government deliver on what they promise, basically. So I was like, yes to all these things, and I started looking at positions and I applied to one back then and they interviewed me, but then I didn't pass this to the second round based on they needed somebody with a bit more experience working with governments, which I didn't have at the time. But nevertheless, Ebele, I persisted. So okay, so after that, I found my job at the international development firm and I was working there. Everything was, as I guess as good as it could be, but it could have been better. I don't know when was this. I think in June or July of last year, they posted another position and they posted two of them. So they posted one that was for somebody to be based in Puerto Rico, and they posted another one for somebody to just be, anywhere in the USA. And I applied to both of those. So at the time, so I moved to New York basically because Diego got like his job moved him here. And so we wanted to stop doing long distance, and we were like, okay, let's move to New York together. So at the time when I applied to that Puerto Rico position, um, Diego and I had talked about moving together and everything, but we, hadn't signed a lease or anything. So, anyways, fast forward, they call me in July to interview. And as I'm sitting in this first interview, they're like, oh, you would be great for Puerto Rico. And I was like, no, I can't move right now. I was like, oh, yeah, of course. And I didn't want to say no because I
Oh my
really
God. I
wanted to
was like,
work at
I
this
wanted to
company.
ask you, did you tell them?
No, okay. So at the time, I was like, well, like right now, I really can't move. Like, when do you need the person to move? Like, I could move next year. Like, I don't really know. And they were like, well, let's see. Let's move you to the next round and we can talk about that later. And they moved me. Anyways, I get to the final round. And, when they called me at first, they wanted me for the USA position. And then they were like, Puerto Rico. And I was like, no. So we get to the final round and they introduce me to the person who would have been my boss in Puerto Rico. And he goes, I think he asked me something like, he's trying to convince me, like hardcore convince me. And he goes, what's the reason? He said it in like really nice words, but he was like, what's holding you back from this? And I had to be like, when you have the thing, like you feel like you're gonna just start crying. I had that feeling and I was like, no, hold it together. And I literally tell him everything. I'm like, okay, I've been in a long distance relationship for 3 years. We already signed a lease because at this point we had our lease signed. We've already signed a lease. Like I'm moving there with him, like it's happening and I really just can't. I cannot make this decision. This is a big curveball. I would need to think about it, everything. And he's like, and he was like, oh, I'm so thankful you were super honest with me. And I was like, yeah. And I hung up from this call and I literally started crying because I was like, I want to take this, but I also had this commitment with, my partner. Like, I don't want to, like if Diego would have done that to me, I would have been so mad. But anyway,
Okay,
fast
Andrea, I'm
forward.
sorry, but this is why I mute myself because when you said if Diego had done this to you, you would be so mad, I started laughing.
So anyways, I ended up having to reject this. And and they were so, so kind. They were like, oh, we've all had to make decisions like this in life. And you're not the first person. And please, like, we're not going to hold this against you. Like, if you see another position, apply. Please keep talking to us. Let's, keep these conversations going. So this was when? This was like August already. So in October, they posted the other position and then they needed somebody to be in New York, which is where I was living. So again, rejection. In this case, I rejected them, but rejection is redirection. And guess what? One of the people on my team is the guy from Puerto Rico. So we ended up even, working together at the end. And, talking a bit more about the company, what they do is, how usually when you work in policy, it's usually 90%, basically 90% policy and then 10% implementation. The way this company works is they focus 90% on implementation and only 10% in policy. So we work in really, making sure that change happens and that it is sustainable over time. And even without our support, like that governments can do the things that we support them and set up, but then they can continue with it without having us do it. So yeah, it's been great. The clients are usually governments, which is, it was interesting to me because coming from a country where our government is basically, well, not the best, to say the least. To me, it's challenging to think about working with governments. And I even asked this during the interview. I was like, oh, how do you do when you don't really agree with the government and things like that? And they were like, well, for us, it's more about what impact can we have through a certain program. And like, if there's ever a time where you don't feel comfortable working with a certain government, you can totally tell us, and like, nobody's gonna hold anything against you at all. So it's a company where I feel like everybody can be themselves, and that's accepted. Um, then there's space for that, and yeah, and you really see the fruits of your work. Like, you really see the impact of what you are doing.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions and also recap some of the things that you have shared with us. First of all, you said that when you found this company, you immediately knew from the website. First of all, you were manifesting. Now you're knowing from the website. Andrea, we have lots of questions to ask you. Are you going to start up like a what's it called? The people who know the future. Am I going to be rich? Am I wasting my
I
time?
don't know.
But something you've always reiterated is how you persisted, through the ups, the downs. You just kept trying, especially when you first applied for the first role and you realize like, hey, these guys actually need someone with a government experience. I think that a lot of times, like, we all have to be comfortable with knocking at a door multiple times. It's not enough to knock the first time and have the door opened and then you feel like I already tried. Resilience has its rewards. And also, you talking about Diego and long distance. So everybody in my grad school program will tell you guys that I told all of them in long distance relationships to break up with their partners. So I'm happy you took my advice in another way and moved in with yours and shortened the distance. But honestly, like, I think it can also be very hard, especially because you don't want to seem like you're being too emotional in a professional space. So having to share that
Mhm.
personal part of yourself where you were telling the guy from Puerto Rico, like, hey, listen, I have this commitment to my partner. And I'm sure that even to yourself, even though you knew it was the right decision, even though it felt like the right decision, it must have also been a little hard, which is probably why, which is why you cried after the call, like, which is why you felt
Mhm.
sad. And I still think it was a very brave thing to do. I don't think it was easy. I also want to say that everybody deserves that great leader, manager, boss, interviewer who understands them the way they understood you and they were really nice about it. Because at the end of the day, we are all human. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know. And I think this is also like a lesson for us because I feel like, yes, we are early, mid, whatever career professionals now, but there will be a time where many people like that are our age now will be in managerial positions. And it's also kind of a wake up call to remember that, hey, you were once in this position and sometimes it sucked, so kind of like make life a little easier for the next person. Before we ask our last question, something we wanted to know is you talked a lot about the interviewing process, but the initial one you had where you eventually had to tell them, I'm not going to Puerto Rico, to the other ones, but from your undergrad, your grad school internship phases to even, I don't know if you interviewed like doing the internship for Dime, for instance, but can you share with us a little bit of what that interview process was? Were there multiple stages? Was it one stage? How did you prepare better? Because I feel that I don't know if this was the case with you, but I feel that there were some interviews that I had, and when I dropped the call, I was like, "Oh my god, that's so cringe." But then I learned from it, and then I realized, okay, this is what I can iterate. So, like, what was that process for you? Like, what was the toughest part? And again, like, how did you learn to deal with that, such that you realize, okay, yes, this is kind of like a weak point, but this is how I can solve it, such that in my next interview, I'll be readier.
um I think for me, this is something that's always worked for myself. I do know that there's people that before an interview they have to basically write down their points, write down everything. When I do that, I get stressed. Um, and I think more about having to say everything on the paper instead of being myself. So for me, it's always been more about showing my true colors. That sounds like a villain, but showing, my true self in an interview. And but there's definitely been times where it's like, oh no, why did what was that? And I remember one time for an interview, for the NGO that I worked after I graduated from college. Evele, this was an interview as supply chain something. I forgot the name of the role, but it was something supply chain. I knew anything, literally anything about supply chain. And I get to this interview without having, prepared at all. Like I only read about the company, but I didn't read anything about supply chain. So I get to this interview and this person asked me something like, if you need to what let me think. It was something like, if you need to buy a medicine for this refugee camp, what is the supply chain process of it? And I think I literally started answering that saying something like, well, you go to the pharmacy and you buy it.
Did she laugh or was she like serious?
No, they were like, they were super serious. Like I was like, oh, I screwed this big time. I was like, oh, I was like, why did I say that? And I was like, I don't, I was like, well, you buy it and then you ship it with, I think I said something like, you ship it with FedEx.
I like how you chose a company already.
Gosh, that was so wrong of me. That was so bad. And I was
Andrea,
like,
I'm laughing
well,
at you. But somebody had
no,
asked me about theory of change and I gave the same answer. Like
you did.
the
Okay.
same kind of like crazy ass answer. And then they were like, let's go for a break. I almost died. In that 5 minutes break, I was dying. I was like, oh my God.
No, I would be so sweaty. It was so bad. I ended up getting the job. I don't know how. I don't know how. I mean, I think a big part of it was that nobody else wanted it. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that I deserved it, but I'm saying that I think a big part of why I got it, although I gave that answer, was that, nobody else wanted an unpaid internship, basically. But no, it was a lot. Yeah. But anyways, a way that I think I recovered from that was when I was in high school. I don't know why I'm going back so many years in my life.
Listen, you can go back to elementary school and we'll be fine.
Okay, cool. So when I was like in high school, I joined Model United Nations, and I remember it's basically like a group, and you fake that you are the UN, and you have these debates. And to get in my school, you had to go through an interview process. And I remember they would make all these really hard questions through the interview process just to see how you would respond. And I remember they told us, like, it's not about the question being wrong or right. I mean, obviously, there's things that you must know for different jobs. It's not a lot about that. It's mostly about, I guess, how you say it in a way. Like, if you say you can say a really crazy answer, but if you say it in a way, I think that a lot of it was the personality wise. Like, they knew that I knew that I was totally wrong in what I was saying, but I think that a lot of it came from humility of accepting I don't know, and just, trying to come up with something. And I remember they also, during that interview, they also asked me something about kind of like a conflict of interest question. And they were like, oh, let's say you need, I think the question was same with like a medicine or something. Let's say you need this medicine shipped, same, to a refugee camp, and you're, a family member of yours owns the shipping company or whatever. Would you go with that one or would you go with another one? And what would be the problem in going with either? And what's like the protocol and the rules? And I was like, I do not know the rules for shipping medicines. And I think I told them like, I don't know the answer to this, but I can try. So I think that a lot of it comes from being honest. A lot of times in this like interviews goes a long way. Being honest about things. And then also, because then if you try to make things up or something in like a crazy way, like I did, it could end up going really wrong. But if you're like, I guess, humble enough to accept, like, I do not know this, but here's my crazy answer to it, it could go a long way. And I think that at interviews, most of the time a lot of times they're interested in your skills. Like, I think your skills are a great part of it. But when they call you for an interview, they're mostly caring about you as a person. That's what I feel like I've experienced. Like, your resume shows them your skills, but your interview gives them a chance to get to know you as a person. And I think that ultimately they want to hire. I read this thing the other day saying that companies would want to end up hiring you based on, like, do I see myself spending time with this person? And I think that's why, like, for me, my best trick is to, of course, prepare for these interviews, but also don't be afraid to show who you are, because, who we are is, like, okay, super cheesy again, but who we are is magic. And like, who we are will get us places.
First of all, the first thing I'm going to do after this interview is write a whole book based on your sayings and pretend they are mine. Because, like, who we are will get us places can definitely be the hook of a song or something on a t-shirt. So watch out for me in 2024.
You
But
could have merch.
You're definitely right. Like, what you said about honesty pays. Like, after that very bad interview with the theory of change, I told myself straight up, if someone asks me something and I don't know, I will just say it. And the second thing you pointed out that I really 100% agree with is personality. Like, and this is also something for you because, okay, first of all, I think that there is a part of an international student where you're really, really desperate and you just want to get any job. And then there's the second part where, okay, yeah, you have a job and it's not the most ideal, but you kind of then have the leverage to start looking somewhere else. And I think that part of looking somewhere else also involves you also asking yourself, do you want to spend time with these people? Because I think it's a great service to yourself if, like, you go through the entire process to get into a company and going to work sucks. So
yeah,
it goes both ways. Ask questions about how the team works, what's the synergy. These are things I think are very, very important. And this is going to be my second to last question, I promise. I'm
no
covering
worries.
my face and laughing.
I still have to show you some resources I found.
Oh my God, you guys. Andrea just shared 1,700 plus impact employers. I'm not joking.
Yeah. So, okay, I found on LinkedIn, when I was last year, when I was at my lowest,
Yeah.
the lowest points, of job seeking, I went on LinkedIn and I found, I'm not kidding, like 20 people who I followed and who constantly post jobs in, like, social impact, migration, UN. Like, I follow, like, everything. And I came across this person who posted this Google sheet. And it's like, it's honestly amazing. Like, look, J Paul is here.
I see so many, like, NGOs and, like, impact organizations that I recognize.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see here if they're looking for a job,
Okay,
location,
wait. You're saying you
eligibility.
can see here, but they can't see here.
That's true. Ebele,
So
you can see here.
I will tell you guys what Andrea is doing, and then she will continue explaining. Right now, we're looking at this spreadsheet where there are 1,700 plus impact employers. We'll be sharing the link to this in the podcast and newsletter episodes. But it's a spreadsheet that has about 4 columns: the name of the company, the sector that they operate in, their website, their job portal, LinkedIn jobs, and the locations where they are operating in. And this is
and that you could work in. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry, locations where you can work in. And it's a very, very, it's giving.
It's very rich, giving. Yeah.
Yeah, it's rich.
No, and you can see here links. It has even, like, links for fully remote impact jobs, list of impact employers. So this is one of the links. And then the other link is this Word document that it has a list of resources for impact job search. So this one has basically, let's say that you're interested in social impact investing, so impact investing, a bunch of links to look for jobs there. And then there's LinkedIn groups and weekly job listings. So these are the people that I actually followed on LinkedIn. You can see them on the list once Evele shares it. There's Facebook groups, Twitter groups, Google groups, different spreadsheets, fellowships. There's basically everything you might need once you start looking for these jobs, like nonprofits, websites, green jobs and climate for people who are interested in that, diversity in hiring, so people who actually, are looking for jobs in gender, human rights, DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then there's a full-on section on international development, humanitarian, peace building, and then a bunch of different resources. So companies hiring remotely, and that's about it. I just shared it with you, so feel free to share with anybody.
This is not me calling out the other guests, but this is the first time someone is coming to this podcast and bringing such detailed resources, especially geared towards the direct topic of the episode, and we're very, very appreciative. Like, I don't even know how you found it. I think it's so funny how we all go through the job search phase and we all find the weirdest things, like in the middle of nowhere, that turn out to be the most useful things. And I know I say I have a second to last question, but the reason I keep having second to last questions is because you share such good stuff, and then I have to ask you follow-up questions. So this is me low-key passing the blame to you. But like when you got this list, was it overwhelming to you? Like when you saw 1,700, I'm sure you were very excited because you're like, oh my God, there are so many opportunities. But then when you got to, okay, let me click on each of these links, did you feel overwhelmed? How did you manage to sieve through the 1,007 to find the places where you felt most connected to? Can you please tell us what that process was?
Yeah, it was definitely overwhelming because it's a lot of information. And I think that what I did was, I think I divided it. So I said like, okay, I want to do this in a week, go through all of them. And I think I said to myself that I was going to go through the sector section. So for some of them some of them were like, okay, climate and something else. And I was like, okay, I'm not really that interested in climate policy, so I'm going to skip this one and go through the next. So that's the approach I took, but it was definitely very overwhelming.
Okay, so try to go by the sectors and pick the places that you feel most resonated with and go from there. That's always very solid advice. Okay, and because I'm a woman of my words, I'll ask my last question and let you go enjoy the chaotic city that is New York. If you had a random advice to give the Andrea who was moving to the US before she got here, and the Andrea who was freaking out about, oh my God, yes, this is the time where my life really messes up and I'm not going to find a job and it's all over. Like looking back and seeing that you went through that entire, you went through those phases where you went through your lows and they were not the best, there were ups and downs, and here you are now. You're at this company where you love the work that you do. You're working directly with the government and you actually feel the impact of your work. What would be the one advice that you would give to her?
I think the advice that I would give to her would be to not compare her journey to others. I think that a big part of why in those different stages of my life, why I felt a bit frustrated was because I was comparing myself to those around me. And I think that going back, if I didn't do that and I understood I have my own journey and things will work out for me perhaps in a different way than they did for others, I think that would have been amazing advice to hear. Yeah.
First of all, this was another response that you had that made me go all gooey-eyed. Because I think that comparison, like, I don't know who said this, but someone said that it's the thief of joy or something like that. Because I think that if each of us individually sit down and we think of how far we have come, you'll understand that, we're not where we used to be. So definitely don't compare yourself with others. Thank you, Andrea. That's the last.
Fun.
Thank you. Like, it was so, like, thank you for sharing with us even the vulnerable aspects of your life, for sharing with us your journey from Minnesota, from your UN days in high school. At this point, you have to take me with you to Venezuela. I have to experience it.
Yes, you need to come.
Okay, wait. Oh my God, it's true. I forgot. So the actual real last question is, for people who have enjoyed this conversation and who want to connect with you, is there anywhere that you're comfortable with connecting with people? It could be your LinkedIn, and do you mind sharing with us? Okay, Andrea has shared her LinkedIn with us. It's Andrea, Andrea, Ocando, Ocando. And we will also be linking her LinkedIn to the description. So please, if you enjoy this conversation, you want to collaborate with Andrea, you want to talk to her, no, wait, she didn't say you can ask her questions, Sha.
You can ask me questions.
Okay, yeah, she said you can ask her questions now. So if you have questions, like, please reach out to her. And also, I want to say thank you so much to you, listener, for listening and staying with us for this almost 1 hour and listening to Andrea's story. We really hope it helps you make better decisions, and it keeps you warm as you go through the job search process and lets you understand that you're not alone on this journey. Till we meet next time, I remain your grad school buddy, and it's been so exciting going on this journey with you. Good luck to all the job searchers, and remember that joy comes in the morning. Bye.